encouragement to turn tragedies into your own triumphant life story? If so, this podcast is for you. Listen to powerful guests who have persevered through challenges so you can gain strength to build your championship life. The host of Professor of Perseverance podcast, Dr. James Purdue.
It's that time again for us to come in and inspire, educate, motivate, and show people that whatever you're going through in life, it's worth living to the fullest. We get hit hard sometimes, but we get up and we move on. And so today, our guest has been dealing with multiple personality disorder. We have a new term for that nowadays, and we'll come to that here as soon as we meet her. All right. She, in 1992, her inner and outer world just fell apart. Suicidal, made an attempt. Thankfully, she failed at this attempt of suicide. She spent 30 days in an inpatient and lost her family. Also, at the same time, she was a teacher, school principal, adjunct instructor, and was in constant pain and thought she was going crazy. She is the author of the book Crazy, memoir, Crazy, Reclaiming Life from the Shallow of Traumatic Memory. Welcome to the show today, Lyn Barrett.
Hello. It's good to be here, James.
Thank you, Lyn. And a nice book cover. I like the colors representing. I'm assuming representing the multiple personalities with the coloring. I could be wrong, but it looks.
You are
nice.
Absolutely right. Each of those colors is supposed to be a silhouette representing a different part of me. So I had probably close to 12, close to 20 different parts of me, or alters as we call them. But in the book itself, I really talk about 12 of them, which is why I said that name. But yes, in 1992, I was diagnosed with multiple personality disorder. 2 years later, that name was changed to dissociative identity disorder. So you don't hear the MPD word very frequently, but you do hear the DID word. And it is portrayed on television and in movies, on YouTube, sometimes very accurately and sometimes very inaccurately. And so I'm here today, hopefully to tell you and your listeners a little bit about my story, but also to educate with some accurate information about what DID actually is.
And that is one reason why I'm glad you're here. Is I know very little about DID. I've just heard of the multiple personalities. Heard, like I said, you see a very misrepresentation in TV.
That's
you
right.
see
That's
people.
right.
It's very. I mean, they blow it up to get people's attention to focus on the show,
Yes.
which is not a fair reality of it.
Exactly.
I don't like going to movies anymore when it says based on a true story. That means they've embellished it just to keep you there, and so stuff in there may or may not be exactly true. When it says based on the truth, I don't like going to them anymore. When I finally figured that out.
Well, I saw a TV show recently. My husband and I watched it, and in more than one of their episodes, they were talking about a client who may have been possessed, but actually had dissociative identity disorder. And I felt that was an unfair representation because it sends people the message that it is really something that it absolutely is not. And
yeah, you got the devil in you. Get the devil out of here.
That's right. That's right.
That's what I'm saying. The TV again, they're trying to keep your attention, trying to keep you in there, but they blow it up so huge and badly that
Yes,
it's not a good representation. Yes.
exactly.
All right, Lynn. So again, appreciate you being here, sharing your valuable time. I like to tell people I really appreciate your valuable time. I know you got better things you could be doing, but I'm glad you're here. And again, going to educate me and others about this DID and going from there. And so also your memoir again is called "Crazy: Reclaiming Life from the Shadow of Traumatic Memory." Came out just weeks ago. Just came out this month. And so appreciate you coming in and sharing that. All right. So take it over, Lynn. You go ahead and you hang, and I'll just ask questions as we go along. You just run
Okay.
with it now.
I'll hang in there and do the best that I can here. The title of my book is Crazy: Reclaiming Life from the Shadow of Traumatic Memory. And I want to clarify the word crazy. I was not crazy, nor is anyone who has dissociative identity disorder or DID crazy. But many of us sometimes feel crazy. Until we are able to discover and uncover this disorder, it can feel very crazy, but it is very treatable, and it is very possible for us to heal and live full and whole lives. And I want to say that up front to give everyone the sense and the understanding that there's hope here. There is lots and lots of hope. But when you're in the middle of it, it feels very hopeless. So, dissociative identity disorder is caused by chronic early childhood abuse or trauma. Not just one experience or two, but many on an ongoing basis. And what happens is the child's brain is still malleable, it's not completely developed. And so when a child is experiencing an awful situation or one that is dangerous for them, they will dissociate, which means separate their mind from their body a little bit. Now that's something that we all do sometimes. You know, we all separate our bodies from our minds for simple things, just for being bored, right? If you're sitting in a lecture hall and a boring professor is droning on and you're looking out the window instead, and you're watching the birds and you're watching the kids kick the soccer ball around, your mind leaves your body and is out there on the lawn. And that's a very benign form of dissociation. But dissociation also kicks in when we are in danger. And so veterans coming home from war with PTSD experience dissociation. Rape victims experience dissociation. But veterans and rape victims do not have DID unless they had early childhood trauma, because that develops only when the child's brain is very malleable. So I want you to think of it this way. A child is totally dependent on their caregivers, which is usually their parents, but not always. It could be other people, teachers, other people that are important to them. So they're dependent on them. And if that same person is abusing them on a regular basis, it actually becomes functional for them to sort of block off the memory of what's happening so they can go back and trust that person again. Because if they couldn't trust that person, they can't take care of themselves, and they really are at a loss. So it is functional for them to sort of separate off this memory of abuse or this emotion that they experienced into different parts. And if it keeps happening, then those parts become more solidified with amnesic barriers, so that one part of you really isn't aware of the other part. Now, this is actually really functional in childhood because it protects the child. It keeps the child from succumbing to actual craziness or even death in a very dangerous situation. And it also enables them to go back to the people who are feeding them, who are clothing them, who keep a roof over their head. And so it keeps the abuse a secret from everyone, including the child, or including the child that's presenting the face that they're fronting. So it's functional in childhood, but it's very dysfunctional in adolescence and adulthood, because at those times, we're probably no longer in danger. And we have these parts that don't even know about each other, and we don't know about them. And we have memories that we can't connect with. And we are starting to feel very, very crazy is how we feel. So it's very dysfunctional in adulthood. I can share with you a little bit about what my symptoms were. They can be, I think most people with DID have experienced the same symptoms I have, or at least similar ones. And some may have experienced other symptoms, but this is in general what the symptoms are like. First of all, I didn't feel like I was me. And my circumstances and my surroundings felt unreal.
Now, hold on, Lyn. Hold on, Lyn. How old were you when you started recognizing this pattern of inconsistency?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I want to say in my mid 30s is when it started for me. For some people, it starts later. For some, it starts earlier.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's not a one stone fit all thing. Yeah, it's
right.
We're all different. We all do things, and yep. So you were roughly around 30.
Yeah, and so I was married. I had 4 children, and I was so happy being a mother. I mean, that was really my calling, was being a mother, and taking care of my brood, being a good wife and all of that. And so there's, in reality, I wasn't aware of it at the time, and didn't learn for quite a few years later. But my husband was having an affair, and so I didn't know that. But I think some parts of me were aware that there was something that wasn't quite right, and so that really accelerated my decompensation. And I was saying I didn't feel like I was me. I was mothering my kids, but sometimes it just felt like this wasn't even my home. Sometimes it even felt like these weren't my children. My emotions and my thinking didn't match. I had multiple strands of thought going through my head at one time. I couldn't remember anything about my childhood. I had body pain everywhere. Sometimes I would just crawl up in bed into a fetal position because I could barely move. I had suicidal ideation. And I did, as you mentioned, actually follow through on that one time. And I thank God that I was not successful.
And
I'll say
thank
something
God that you were
about,
a failure at that as well.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Now here's the interesting thing. At the same time, all of this was happening at home and inside my head and my heart and my body. I could go out every day and excel at being a teacher, and a little bit later actually excel at being a school principal. And I was aware of that. I was like, how can this be that I can be so competent and capable in school, but I just roll up into a ball at home? How can this possibly be? I really didn't understand that. So I had made that suicide attempt, and I just kept working and working. It was like climbing an uphill mountain. You just keep climbing and you keep falling back. And so 2 years after that attempt, I checked myself into the women's unit of a psychiatric hospital for 30 days. And that helped to stabilize me, because I really had been suicidal before I had gone in. It stabilized me. It didn't solve any problems. there was no diagnosis at that time. I still had no idea what was causing this. I still felt like I was crazy, but at least I was stable at that point. And so I came out of the hospital. I actually moved to a different community. I got a different job, and I found a new therapist who was a trauma-informed therapist. And with her, my alters began to show themselves because they could really trust her. The first alter that I met was named Rosie, and I learned about her in a twilight dream that I had, where I heard this message that said to me, you have a twin sister, but she is me, and they gave her away, and her name is Rosie. Now, I didn't have a twin sister, and my parents didn't give anybody away. But this was sort of the story, the inner story that this little 3-year-old child named Rosie had woven. And so I that was just sort of a message from my insides to tell me about this. And it wasn't until, probably maybe 8-10 months later that she actually came up and started to talk and tell me some of her story. And indeed, that is how we begin to heal from DID, is when we allow our alters to come forward and to talk to us and to tell us their stories and to tell us their experiences. Now, that's not always an easy thing because we have some alters that are really difficult. So we might have angry alters, or we might have an alter filled with shame, or we might have a sexual alter. We might have alters with all different kinds of purposes and functions, as I did. And some of them are not fun to be around, or at least they weren't in the beginning. Every time a different alter would come forward in the room, the therapy room, my therapist would say, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. You're safe now, and I hope you come back again. And so what we find is that our alters are all, they all began as hurt children. Now, some of them grew up a little bit. I had teenage alters, and I had an alter who was really an old woman who took care of Rosie. She was really tired of taking care of this child. So they can be all different ages inside of you. But in point of fact, they begin as hurt children, and who are actually protecting us during a time when we're being abused. So I was at this point. So my therapist thought that I had at that time called multiple personality disorder, but I didn't trust that, and so I went to a psychiatrist who had a great deal of experience in this, and I was evaluated, and he, in fact, confirmed that diagnosis, and that was in 1992. So I often divide that period, that 20-year period of my life, into two. Actually, if I take a 30-year period of my life, I can divide it into thirds. So the first 10 years was decompensating, falling apart, totally feeling crazy, having no idea what was going on, and the only solution was to die. The second 10 years of my life was having the diagnosis and then beginning the appropriate therapy. I still felt suicidal sometimes. I still felt crazy sometimes, but at least I knew what was behind the root of what was going on.
Let me ask this question now. Still being suicidal, was that one of your alternates that was suicidal,
yes,
pushing it through you, or it was you just because of all the emotions and think you're going crazy?
So I think it was both, James, but I think it was really driven by an alter called Snake.
Okay.
And Snake was created in the moment of the first violation in great pain. and so he perceived that he left the body. That was his perception, is that he left the body. And he didn't, even while all the other alters really cared about me and cared about us as a system, Snake couldn't care less, or at least that's what he said. And because he believed that he was outside of the body, he would say, I, you know, your body is pathetic. You know, I don't need your body to keep living, you know. And so he was the part of me that drove that. Now, my therapist also welcomed Snake, and told him that he was a hurt child, and had some of the other alters minister to him in a sense towards the latter part of my therapy. And so he lost a lot of his venom. But he was the one who really was ready to get rid of this body through suicide, because all it was getting in the way. So, of course, because children are creating these parts, they're not always rational or practical. You know, we all know that if I died, he would die too. But he didn't believe that. He thought that he was outside of the body and that he could manage. But that was his desire, was let's get rid of it, because all it does is create pain.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not sure where I was in the story. So, I know I was the second 10 years was really doing the healing work that one does with your alters, but also I had trust issues. I had relationship and intimacy issues. I had lots of triggers that I had to work on that would send me into tremendous pain. So we worked on all those things for the next 10 years. Towards the end of that 10 years, my alters spontaneously and on their own integrated. Now, that doesn't mean they're not still there, because that's the way my brain was formed. But they pretty much came to a place of trusting me to be able to resolve issues and problems, and that they decided that our lives would be better if we functioned as one rather than in parts. Now, there are some folks with DID who do that healing work and come through the issues of relationship and triggers and memories and so forth, and decide that they want to remain in parts. And that's a valid choice. So the important thing is that you do all the healing work, that you give all your alters time to share their stories, to tell you.
I was going to say open up.
Yeah, and to let them start communicating with each other, so that there's no longer amnesia between them. And so once you've started to heal the symptoms of abuse of any kind, you know, that anybody who's been abused might experience, whether or not they have DID, you have to heal those symptoms. And when you heal them, if your system, that's what we call the collection of alters and how they work with each other, if your system decides they'd rather stay in parts, they can do that. But in my case, they chose to integrate without my input, and they just did it. And
leaving you to be the one in control.
That's right. And for the most part, yeah. One of them pops up. Now, the last 10 years, so if we talk about it, one third, and a third, the last 10 years has been post integration, and actually, that's the last 20 years. I've been integrated for 20 years. So I guess I have to go back and do my geometry over again. But, that has not been trouble-free. Of course, as we all in life, we have faced different kinds of challenges. But I've been able to face them in a unified way. And I no longer have the kind of triggers and body memories and suicidal feelings. As a matter of fact, I would say that my greatest and strongest feeling that I feel every single moment of my life is gratitude. I just feel so grateful for life
Yes.
itself, and for the gifts that I've been given. You probably noticed in my profile that I had a spiritual journey that was concurrent with the healing journey, because I had been born and raised an atheist by my parents, and it was very slow. But the more, sometimes they say that God works through our wounds, and I was about as wounded as you could get. I had
I can
big
imagine.
wounds, and so God found a way into me, and uh, ultimately, in the end, I went to seminary and became an ordained minister. I'm retired now, but I do have a very fulfilling life. I am happy. I have a wonderful husband, and I have children and grandchildren, and one great grandchild around the
Congratulations.
world, actually. So,
There you go.
yeah,
Now,
but
question is, the same husband been through all this with you?
not, no, no. We
Because
divorced.
this is it can be overwhelming for someone that doesn't understand.
Right, absolutely. So my well, I'll give a plug for the book if you
Go
want to know
ahead.
all the
Yep. Go
details.
ahead. Yes. Go
You can
ahead.
really get to them. But so my first husband and I divorced, and it was a very, very painful and ugly divorce. And I won't go into that on the podcast.
Hmm.
Some of that is in the memoir. I tried not to put everything in it because it's too much of a downer, but
Yeah.
it was really quite difficult. I want to say that my ex-husband and I now have a good relationship. So hallelujah, praise God, it is
Yes.
possible. But at that time, it was really hard. And I was alone for um, 20 years. I was alone for 20 years. And I really yearned for a relationship. Um, but I was still doing so much work. And I guess I knew that I really wasn't healthy enough to have a healthy relationship. And I had some friends
Hmm.
through that time, but I didn't have an intimate partner. And then uh, in I guess I was in my early 60s. I met my second husband, and he fell madly in love with me, and I fell madly in love with him. He was a wonderful man,
There
and
you go. Praise God, sister.
praise God. But however, uh, 4 days before our first anniversary, he died suddenly and unexpectedly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry for that.
It was tragic, and but the first thing that came to me was the grief is great, but the gratitude is greater, and that shows you how how far I had come, that I could say that, because he and I had been in such pain for so many years, and so alone for so many years, that even though we had only been together for about a year and a half, um, he gave me so much, and I
Hmm.
know I gave him so much too, and so
Yes.
we were so both very lucky people. So
Well,
I
I
mean,
don't use the word luck in a lot of places, but I usually interchange it with blessed. You know,
yes, we
very
were blessed.
blessed
You're
that
right.
both of you were able to find each other,
Yeah.
even for a short term. There is so much more into it to grasp on a
I
short
know.
term than again nothing at all.
A friend of mine said to me, well, I said, can't remember if I said it to her or if she said it to me, but it was almost as if he was an angel that just dropped into my life,
Hmm.
and then I said, well, no, he definitely wasn't an angel. But who knows? God's angels maybe are probably all we're all tainted in our own ways, and so. But he was a wonderful man, and I was blessed. I was absolutely blessed, and deeply grieving his loss. But I had learned how to live through such trying and difficult circumstances that it wasn't hard for me to pick back up. I picked back up, and at this point I was still I was in ministry, And so I just picked back up in ministry and plowed ahead. And 5 years after that, I met my third husband, who I've been with now for 7 years. And he is equally wonderful. And God has blessed me for all the pain and all of the confusion and all the craziness and fear, shame, and doom. He has healed me of most all of that, and He has given me this gift of intimacy, gift of friendships, gift of purpose, and gift of gratitude. And so I just give thanks for that. And so I want to share this with your listeners who are struggling perhaps with all kinds of challenges, very different from mine. Perhaps maybe a few of your listeners are struggling with DID, but other listeners may be struggling with physical, spiritual, psychological, emotional, family, relationship issues, all kinds of issues. I just want to say that your life is worth living, and there is another side. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and to hang on.
Well,
there.
I like it when my guests say they bring up the light at the end of the tunnel, because then I like to throw in my little 2 cents worth. When you know that light at the end of the tunnel is not a train coming, you have made it to the other end to live a life worth living.
That is right. And I've had a few trains in the tunnel.
That's right. That's
But
right.
I'm still here
Sometimes
and
that
I am
light,
standing.
yeah, sometimes that light is not the end. So it may be the beginning of the next thing coming. But once you realize it's not that train, then yeah, now we could go ahead and live that life.
And James, you are so right, because the reality is that life is never perfect. And we climb one mountain only to find another one that's up ahead. But I think as we climb more mountains, and as we grow in resilience, and we grow in faith, that we can begin to take those some of those mountains begin to shrink. They may look like mountains in the beginning, but we can handle them. We can manage them. We can get through them, and we can get to the other side. And yeah, there's there definitely are some lights in the tunnels. The tunnel that's a train, but in the end, there's a sense and a feeling of just of gratitude and of peace. With and some of that is peace with knowing that I'm an imperfect person and I'm never going to be perfect, and of knowing that my life will never be perfect, but in knowing that I've come to this place of accepting myself and loving myself, and loving the people around me. So you are getting me into a sermon here, so you probably need to
There
stop
we
me,
go. Well,
because I'll
you're
keep
doing
going
you're
on
doing
all that.
you're doing great. I would just suggest that I love hearing when people, not that I mean, I'm hearing it through you. You're not saying what I'm specifically, but I'm hearing through you that when someone can sit back and kind of go, you know, when I look back at what I went through and how far I've come, how strong I've gotten, how strong I really am, finding that out, and then being able to use that experience to get me over the next mountain with the
Yeah.
tools that I've earned and used now to make things easier in life. And then again, perseverance is just right there at your grasp.
Well, you just articulated it perfectly. You life gives you tools, and you learn it and you get through it. And I also want to say to anybody out there who does have DID or any other deeply emotionally troubling illness, that in standing here before you, as I hope an inspiration that healing can come, in no way does that negate the pain you may be feeling now. In no way does that negate how overwhelmed you may feel. In no way does that negate that you may not even want to wake up tomorrow morning, because we've been there, and that is real. And I want to affirm your reality. But I also want to affirm the fact that if you keep putting one foot ahead of the other, and if you seek out the support, help, treatment that you need, and that if you reach out for people you can trust, you'll get there. You will get there.
Yeah. Well, Lyn, I appreciate it. I've learned a little bit here, and that's one reason I do this podcast is selfishly for me to learn, but for you to help other people in the long run. Again, not necessarily people with DID, but like you mentioned earlier, emotional, physical, yeah, from there mentally, that they're spiritually struggling as well. And from there, hey, Lyn, go ahead and tell people how they can find you socially, how they can get a hold of your book, your
Yes.
website.
Yes. Well, the book is available on Amazon.com, and on BarnesandNoble.com, and really on any online bookstore, and there are many in-store bookstores as well. So it actually is on pre-order right now, and it will be released on January 3rd. So get there now. And actually, if you use Kindle books, it's going to go, if you pre-order, it will automatically be reduced to 99 cents when the book is released. If you like paper-bound books, though, go for it and order that, and you'll have it as a New Year reading habit.
To be put on their reading list for next year.
That's right, reading list for next year. So I have been, I do have two different websites. One is www.lynbarrett.com. That's LYNBARRETT.com. And I write a weekly blog. And you can read it on my website. You can also sign up to have it come in your mailbox once a week. And you can, I also have a website that is called dissociativewriters.com, and that's at www.dissociative writers, WRITERS.com. And that's for people who are interested in writing their own stories about their dissociative disorders, or for people who write poetry around their dissociative experiences. We have two different writers' workshops currently that are free, and that are that they meet every other week, and they're a wonderful place for people who are healing from a dissociative order to connect with other folks who are doing the same, and who write in order to help their healing progress. And you will find supportive people who understand your story, and people that you can trust. It's very difficult for people with dissociative disorders to share their story, because from the beginning we were sort of programmed not to share this story. It wasn't for others to know. So a writer's workshop is one way to do it in a very safe way.
I'm a firm believer of people writing their memoirs, their own life story, and especially when pain is involved, because it's a great form of therapy, putting it out there on paper, right. Whether you publish it or not.
That's right.
Just to put it down on paper or computer, it's a way to express yourself and get some emotions released.
And publishing for some people is really just coming to a writer's workshop and sharing their writing. I mean, that's its own form of publication, you know.
Yes, yes.
So sharing it with one other person, or writing it and taking it to your therapist. That's another way of publishing, you know, your writing, sharing it with someone else. So you don't have to find yourself in a bookstore to share your writing.
There we go. Lyn, I'll put those links in the show notes for people that are coming back for the replay for to be able to find your information easier. And so, all right, Lyn, again, appreciate you being here. It's been very educational, inspiring. Last thing here, we know that people are struggling, hurting today. If you can leave them with a positive message, I mean a powerful, positive message to get through today, that's going to be a blessing.
This is a very simple but powerful message. You are worth it. You are worth it. I just want you to hear that and to let it sink in, to know that no matter what kind of pain you're experiencing, what kind of internal or external chaos is in your life, you are worth it.
And there's a difference between knowing and hearing you're worth it and believing you're worth it.
Yes.
Once you're believing, you're in great shape.
Yes.
Believe All right, it. Lyn, thank you for coming in. Hey, everybody else, thank you for coming in and listening. If you're on the replay, be sure to share this out. You know someone needs this hope, this inspiration to know that they can get through another day. So be sure to share this out to someone that you know that needs some help. Hey, I'm Dr. James Purdue, the professor of perseverance. Again, do something today, tomorrow, something next week that's going to help you persevere past your paralysis.